It's Mock Draft Monday, and this week we're trading up and we're trading down. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome inside today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I'm your host, David Harrison, here with you every Monday through Friday. Thank you for joining me at the start of a new week. I'm your friend on the ground covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com, also helping out with WUSA9.com's local coverage of the team. And I want to thank you for coming through for today's Mock Draft Monday episode. It is time for another mock draft. We're doing two of them. We're trading up, we're trading back. We'll get into that here in just a moment. Every day, or those of you who come through every day, including the off season, I want to give you a special thank you for being the best part of the show. If you haven't already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode. If you're new to the show, thanks for giving it a try. I'm glad you found it. Hopefully you like it. Hopefully you come back more, maybe even become an everydayer. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It is Mock Draft Monday. We are in the early stage, or the early stages of the week of the NFL Scouting Combine, if that makes any sense whatsoever. On Monday, I will be traveling to Indianapolis, Indiana for the 2025 NFL Scouting Combine. I will be there Tuesday. I will be there Wednesday as we talk to General Manager Adam Peters, Head Coach Dan Quinn, and we are supposed to talk to Assistant General Manager Lance Newmark. Now, obviously, those types of things could change. Lance Newmark not required to speak to us at the Scouting Combine. So if something happens or schedules, whatever, craziness things happens with busy people, we may or may not get to talk to Lance, but we are expecting to speak to Lance. I will be on my way home Thursday, and I'll be watching the drills, just like most of you will be, from the comfort of my home, preferably eating some wings or something while I take some notes on some of these mock draft prospects, or NFL draft prospects, I should say. While I'm there, I will talk to some of the players that are talking while I get to partake there, including defensive linemen, which I know that there are a lot of Commanders fans interested in some of the defensive linemen in this year's class, as am I. So as we get into this NFL Scouting Combine week, we got to do another Mock Draft Monday. And I thought, looking back at the Mock Draft Mondays we've already had this year, one thing that we haven't done was entertain the idea of trading. So I wanted to take a look at that here, specifically with pick number 29. Now, obviously, trades can come at any point in the NFL draft, and at some point in time, we'll get a little bit fun with it. We'll get a little bit crazy, a little bit loose, do multiple trades in a mock draft, all that stuff. But I wanted to do a mock draft here where we just focus on pick number 29. We're going to trade up in one mock draft. We're going to trade down in one mock draft, and we're going to use the Rich Hill draft pick trade value chart to try to help dictate some of those draft trades. So if you want to follow along, that is the draft value chart that you need to Google to look at these point values. And on the Rich Hill draft pick trade value chart, we get 202 points for the number 29 overall pick. We're not going to include players in these picks, so no John Allen along with number 29, all that kind of stuff. We're just looking at draft capital in this thing. And I asked insiders, do you want to trade back first or do you want to trade up first? And it was a resounding trade back. And I think a lot of NFL fan bases, I know me personally, I tend to be team trade back. But sometimes when you see a team get to the NFC Championship game, you get a fan base, you get media members who get all about trading up and saying, you might be one or two players away. Go get one of those blue chip players in the NFL draft. Go trade up and do that. And we will entertain that idea as well in this episode. But we're going to start by trading back. And when I get into this conversation, just kind of right off the top of my head, I'm really expecting the best package for us to get in a trade back scenario to likely net a 4th round pick in 2025. So you're going to get a 4th round pick that's in the range of 34 to 15 points, depending on where it is in the 4th round, which means you're looking for a top pick, right? That higher pick that you get back in this package be within the range of 187 to 168 points, which pretty much puts you starting off with number 32, the Philadelphia Eagles. If you want to trade back with the Eagles, let the Eagles move up to number 29. I know Commanders fans, not a huge fan of letting the Eagles move up. Last year, they moved up with the Commanders in the 2nd round. Eagles took Cooper DeJean. Cooper DeJean gets a pick 6 on his birthday in the Super Bowl. Again, it's not the Commanders' fault, whatever, all those things. But we always know that people do not like seeing teams trade within the division, especially when you're giving a division rival a better draft pick than they had before. Playing around with the PFF mock draft database or simulator. That's probably the simulator we're going to use all off season long. It seems to be kind of the most consistent and best working and all that stuff. And it looks like the best deal that we might be able to get isn't number 32 with the Philadelphia Eagles. It's actually one pick later, number 33 with the Cleveland Browns. And we might be able to get number 94. So 94 is actually a third round pick. So remember, I come into this thinking the best we're probably going to get is a trade back top pick, either first round or early second rounder, and a fourth round pick. But in this scenario, we have the possibility of getting a third round pick. Part of the reason we might get that third, it is a compensatory pick. So it's not a pick that the Cleveland Browns just kind of have organically. It's a compensatory pick. Call it inflation for the Browns getting back into the first round. We move out of the first round. We get a late third round pick instead of maybe an early fourth round pick from the Cleveland Browns. PFF gives it a 70% chance of working. So we're going to go ahead and hit the button on that one, and they take it. So we get the 70% chance to come through. We end up getting pick number 33, the first pick in the second round on day 2, and we get another third round pick for the Washington Commanders in the process. So that is the trade back that we look at in this scenario. The Cleveland Browns trade up. They get offensive lineman Gray Zabel at number 29 out of North Dakota State University. Look, haven't done a full workup on a lot of guys, especially Gray Zabel, but I'm not particularly as high on Zabel as some people are, especially as a day one target. So I'm okay with Gray Zabel coming off the board to the Browns in that situation. Now, when we do get on the clock at number 33, our first pick of this mock draft Monday, we look at the board. I look at the board. I scan the needs, and I'm going to go edge Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State. Now, this is a guy who's got very good pass rush grade out of Ohio State, very good run defense grade. Not the best run defense grade among edge defenders out of just Ohio State alone. JT Tuimoloau actually has the best run defense grade of these guys, but Jack Sawyer has the best combination of pass rush ability, run defense ability proven at Ohio State. You love the fire, you love the leadership, you love the passion that Jack Sawyer shows on the field and all these things. So Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State is going to be our first pick of this mock draft. Now we go to number 61, which is the organic Washington Commanders second round pick that they already own. And we're just going to flip sides on the line of scrimmage. Again, I always kind of go back to Daniel Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks is the first people I've heard say this. Heard it a lot since then, but those are the first two I heard say it, so I always attribute it to them. It's really hard to be a bad team when you're good in the trenches. Really hard to be a good team when you're bad in the trenches. Washington Commanders weren't bad in the trenches in 2024, but they weren't as good as they could be. We addressed the edge group, defensive line with our first pick. With the second pick, let's attack the offensive line. We're going offensive tackle Cameron Williams out of Texas. He's a starting right tackle out of Texas. 1 year of tackle experience, so not the fullest resume there. Does have guard experience as well. And as we know, Sam Cosmi has an issue or an injury that he is dealing with. So again, we'll bring Cameron Williams in. We'll let him work with Bobby Johnson. We'll figure out, is Cameron Williams as the guard, Andrew Wiley as the tackle, the best combination, or is Andrew Wiley the guard, Cameron Williams the tackle, the best combination? We'll figure that out as we get through this process and go through there. But we address the offensive line. We address the defensive line. Number 79, we come back and we get another Texas Longhorn. We're going tight end Gunnar Helm. He's got a good pass catching resume, good run blocking resume. He's a player that we've talked about in the past as well. I look at him right now as a number 3 tight end with our fingers crossed that before we get to April, Zach Ertz has been re-signed. So we got Zach Ertz, Ben Sinnott stepping up to that number 2 role. Gunnar Helm, who, yes, he's a third round pick and he's the number 3 tight end. But we're looking at not just this year, but we're also looking at the future. And look, Zach Ertz, really great season last year in 2024, even with his age, even with everything else. But there's no guarantee for anybody that he's going to get through 2025 as cleanly and as healthy as he did before. So we're going to go ahead and pull the trigger there. Number 94 are the second, third round pick that we got in this trade from the Cleveland Browns. We're going to go with cornerback Mello Dotson out of Kansas. He's a perimeter corner. Doesn't necessarily mean we're automatically pushing Mikey Sainristil inside. There's a possibility in free agency. By now, we've gotten Jordan Lewis, former Dallas Cowboys slot defender. There's some other slot defenders out there, but of course, we've got Marshawn Lattimore out there. We've got Mikey Sainristil. Hopefully, again, like I said, we got Jordan Lewis. Now we add Mello Dotson to the group because remember, we're expecting Benjamin St-Juste and Michael Davis to both kind of walk, and behind that, there are no other real perimeter cornerbacks out there. Percy Butler got a little bit of work here and there during the preseason, things like that, but he's not a true blue perimeter corner. So we go get a depth cornerback, outside perimeter guy who, if we need him to, could potentially develop into a reliable option, rotational player in that position. But we're not done here. We still have day 3 to go in this first iteration, our trade back version of this week's Mock Draft Monday. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. When the games tip off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay easily. My favorite thing about FanDuel same game parlays. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my favorite team or looking for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3. I never feel like I'm missing any of the action. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you can get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers, you can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Continuing now today's Mock Draft Monday, NFL Scouting Combine week. So we're getting the week started off right here with a Mock Draft Monday. We traded back in this scenario. We traded number 29 overall to the Cleveland Browns for number 33 and number 94. 33, we went edge rusher Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State. Number 94, we got cornerback Mello Dotson out of Kansas. Between there, we went tackle with Cameron Williams out of Texas, tight end with Gunnar Helm also out of Texas. So the only 2 organic picks we've had this Mock Draft Monday, we've spent on Texas Longhorns. No, I'm not a Longhorns fan, but those guys are good, stinking players. Coming back now, day 3, 4th round, we're sitting on our hands. We're not doing nothing. But 5th round, we get pick number 147. We're taking defensive lineman Simeon Barrow Jr. out of Miami, Florida. 6th round, 204, we're getting running back Bashul Tutin out of Virginia Tech. And the interesting thing about Bashul is he's actually getting a little bit of first round buzz. There are actually some people who are talking about his testing might be through the roof and he might be a workout warrior and get some first round love and all that kind of stuff. But I'll tell you right now, he's got a little bit of a ball security issue, things like that, on tape in college. So I don't know that that's necessarily going to come true, but Bashul Tutin, certainly a guy who's got some tools. 2 picks in the 7th round, number 237, we're going to get linebacker Jamin Dumas Johnson out of Kentucky. And number 249, we're going to go with wide receiver Zachary Franklin out of Illinois. So out of this first draft class, again, we're going to trade. We traded back here. We are going to do a trade up. There's a little bit more thought process behind the trade up than there is in the trade back. So stick with me for that. But in this mock draft version, we get a starting edge in Jack Sawyer to go opposite Dorrance Armstrong Jr. We get a right tackle candidate with offensive guard experience to give Bobby Johnson, the Commanders' offensive line coach, the ability to kind of work his magic and do what he needs to do. We got a tight end to come in behind Zach Ertz, behind Ben Sinnott, and develop. Outside depth at corner, potential replacement for Lattimore if he develops and Marshawn Lattimore struggles. I know there are some Commanders fans who are not necessarily in love with Marshawn Lattimore so far. Does sound like the team intends to bring him back, but it doesn't mean that he's going to last, forever here. Defensive line depth on day 3, a sleeper back to develop as kind of an Austin Eckler replacement type of guy, and then depth special teams linebacker and a wide receiver who Zachary Franklin, formerly considered a top 10 NFL prospect among college wide receivers. So we'll see how much of that talent is able to get tapped into by Bobby Ingram, Cliff Kingsbury, and the Washington Commanders offensive scouting or staff. Now, running back has been a point of emphasis for someone. We did go running back here on day 3, but I know some of you are going to be a little disappointed we didn't go running back sooner. Look, Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina was available at number 33. Number 61, Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee was available. Cam Scatterbo out of Arizona State. And if you're an everydayer, it was hard for me to pass on Cam. Quinshawn Judkins and Travion Henderson were also available at number 61. Both of them from Ohio State. Now, Travion Henderson went 1 pick before we took Gunnar Helm at number 79. And I'll tell you right now, if Henderson was there at 79, absolutely would have taken Travion Henderson. But I prioritized the alt lineman. I prioritized what the Washington Commanders needed there and the talent, right? Cameron Williams is also a very good talent. So it's not like we just went need. We also went talent with Cameron Williams, a very good tackle prospect in this year's NFL draft class. So that is the reason that halfback kind of took a hit by the time the tight end came around, or 79 came around. Not really a lot of good halfbacks. And then the way that the board kind of fell We didn't go running back in eventually until the 6th round, again, with Bashul Tootin, who, again, I think he's got good prospects or good potential. Again, just got to get that ball security tightened up. So that's our trade back version. For our trade up version, the highest value that I could see us trading up for would be number 15 to Atlanta. Like if you just really love a dude, then you send this year's first, you send next year's first, and maybe even next year's fourth. Adam Peters doesn't seem to like 4th round picks. So maybe next year's fourth. That's a total of 312 points in the Rich Hill model. 312 points is closest to number 15, which is 315 points. That's the Atlanta Falcons. So what I wanted to do is if we're looking at number 15 as the earliest we might trade up. That's the earliest we might trade up. Then I'm going to make a big board eyeing 12 of the top players because you figure, we're not putting quarterbacks on there. At least 2 quarterbacks are going, if not more. Plus just the way that the NFL draft works, we're likely to have at least one of these 12 players available at 15, if not more. So the 12 players I put on our big board coming into this trade up watch: edge, Abdul Carter out of Penn State. Look, I'm just telling you what the big board is. I know not all of these guys have even a chance of getting there, but just bear with me. Defensive tackle Mason Graham out of Michigan. Edge rusher Jalen Walker out of Georgia. Offensive tackle Will Campbell out of LSU. Cornerback Will Johnson out of Michigan. Wide receiver Teteroa McMillan out of Arizona, or Tet McMillan out of Arizona. Edge rusher Michael Williams out of Georgia. D tackle Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. Offensive tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. Edge rusher James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. Defensive tackle Derek Harmon out of Oregon. Edge rusher Mike Green out of Marshall. Starting at number 15, wide receiver Tet McMillan went number 5 to the Jaguars. He's the first person on our big board that comes off the draft board in this simulation, which means after pick number 5, we got 11 of our targets left and only 9 picks until we're in our window. So we know that someone in our top 12 is going to be available at 15. So we are going to be involved in some of these trade up conversations. Where we pull the trigger is still TBD. Edge rusher Abdul Carter goes number 6 to the Raiders, which I'll be surprised if he gets out the top 5, but that's where it goes here. Edge rusher Mike Green goes number 7 to the Jets. Cornerback Will Johnson, number 8 to the Panthers. Offensive tackle Will Campbell, number 9 to the Saints. Defensive tackle Mason Graham goes number 10 to the Bears. So you see our names are starting to come off here. Edge rusher James Pierce goes number 14 to the Colts. So at number 15, when the Atlanta Falcons get on the clock, 7 of the 12 that we were willing to trade up for are gone. That only leaves 5. Edge rusher Jalen Walker out of Georgia. Edge rusher Michael Williams out of Georgia. Defensive tackle Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. Offensive tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. And defensive tackle Derek Harmon out of Oregon. PFF Draft Simulator says number 29 and a 2026 first are enough to get the trade done. But usually these picks also include something this year. Like the Falcons don't typically say, okay, we'll take your first round pick and just future capital, and then we'll leave it at that. They typically want something else this year. If you're going to do that, you're not going to give up a first round pick, right? So number 29, number 79, and a 2026 third has a 71% chance of working, which is high. But I don't necessarily love giving up the 3rd round pick. I don't love giving up the 3rd round pick this year and next year. Again, going back to Adam Peters' kind of tendencies, we're looking at 4th round pick. So if I'm going to add a 4th round pick here, then I'm actually going to say number 29 this year, 1st rounder, number 79 this year, 3rd rounder, and 2026 4th. That's basically the most I'm willing to give up for the guys that are left on the board right now. That has a 31% chance of being accepted by the Falcons. So we're not trading up with the Falcons is basically the end of that discussion. They don't get any of our targets. The Falcons don't draft any of our targets, so that's good. Next up is the Arizona Cardinals at 16. Our trade package offer has a 51% chance of succeeding, but they do decline it. Arizona takes a D lineman, but not one of our D linemen. So we dodged the bullet there with both of those. And up next are the Bengals at 17. We offer them the same chance or the same package. Again, 1st and 3rd this year, 4th next year, and they take it. So we move up to number 17. Here's the deal. Number 29, number 79 in this year's draft, 4th round pick next year. We move up to number 17 in the 2025 NFL draft. And with the 17th pick, we take offensive tackle Kelvin Banks. Why we go that direction and the rest of that class coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. With the 17th pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Washington Commanders on this mock draft Monday are taking offensive tackle Kelvin Banks out of Texas. If you're trading up in the NFL Draft from 29 to 17, you're giving up your 1st round pick this year, a 3rd round pick this year, a 4th round pick next year. You're not doing it for anything other than pass-related items. You're either going to protect your passer or you're going to improve your pass rush. To me, that's the bottom line. And for the Washington Commanders, you look at the board, you got some talented edge rushers from Georgia, but I think that starts with protecting Jayden Daniels. He is the franchise future for your team. Kelvin Banks Jr. is a first-round talent at tackle. He's the guy that you need to go out there and get if you're trading up to number 17 with the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, both are needs for Washington, but remember, the Commanders' offensive line had one of the highest pressure rates in the NFL last season. Their sack rate wasn't the highest. Their quarterback hit rate wasn't the highest, but their pressure rate, absolutely one of the highest in the National Football League. So instead of relying on Jayden Daniels to make the O-line look better, let's go make the O-line better. Banks is the second offensive tackle off the board in this mock, and it signals a shift to Brandon Coleman moving to the right side. As the roster stands today, probably means we're shifting Andrew Wiley inside to right guard to fill in for Sam Cosmi. Kelvin Banks will come in and be the left tackle. Banks fits the experience mold for Washington. He started and played extensively for the Longhorns over the past 3 seasons. In those 3 years, was credited with giving up just 4 sacks total. 2 of those came in his first season playing major snaps, 2022. In 2024, he gave up only 10 pressures all season long, no sacks in true pass sets, which are non-screens, rollouts, or play action passes. On top of that, Banks had an 81 PFF grade in run blocking. So absolutely worth the trade. That leaves us with picks number 61, 147, 204, 237, and 249 in this year's draft. With the rest of this capital, number 61, just like we did in the last one, we went edge with our first pick last time. We went tackle with the second pick. This time we're going offensive tackle out of Texas. We're going edge out of Michigan, Josiah Stewart with our second round pick, number 61. Now, from the second round to the 5th round, we're bored. No 3rd round pick, no 4th round pick. Number 147 in the 5th round, defensive lineman Simeon Barrow Jr. out of Miami, Florida. Might sound familiar because we took the same guy in the last mock draft. 204 in the 6th round, we take tight end Luke Lachey out of Iowa. Number 237, 7th rounder, running back Jaquindon Jackson out of Arkansas. Number 249, 7th rounder, cornerback Cam Miller out of Penn State. For what it's worth, PFF gave us an A for our trade and selection of Kelvin Banks Jr. Look, where are the holes in this mock draft? Well, we didn't get a high receiver. We didn't get a receiver very high in this draft. We didn't get a receiver at all in this mock draft. We didn't get a receiver high in either mock draft. So hopefully we got like Chris Godwin is on the roster. Maybe the Bengals didn't tag T. Higgins and they did go ahead and pay him, much to my disagreement. T. Higgins is on the roster. I don't know. Whoever the receiver is, maybe Noah Brown is back, right? Doing things like that. Didn't go tight end early. So again, we're looking at Zach Ertz being back, Ben Sinnott. You do get a tight end out of Iowa, trying to tap into that Iowa tight end kind of heritage and lineage and see if you can't develop a guy there as your number 3 tight end. No linebackers. So welcome back, Bobby Wagner. And also Dante Fowler Jr., because you need that outside linebacker presence, right? So look, obviously when you trade away picks to move up, you're going to have a smaller draft class. And that means hopefully, again, cornerback Cam Miller is a slot guy, but I mean, are you really going to draft a dude in the 7th round and say, come be our starting slot? So no, again, hopefully Jordan Lewis is on the team to be your starting slot while Cam Miller develops behind him, things like that. And then again, running back Jaquindon Jackson is a guy who's got a good amount of balance, 6'1", got some good size. Not necessarily a Brian Robinson replacement, but just another dude that can really kind of tote the rock. And he's a 7th rounder, so you're not expecting a whole lot from him in year 1, but develop hopefully in the next couple of years into a guy that can contribute to the team. Simeon Barrow Jr., defensive line depth again, like we did in the first mock draft. So 2 mock drafts here for you. Mock Draft Monday to start off NFL Scouting Combine weekend. For many of you, as you're watching or listening to this, I'm on the road headed towards Indianapolis, Indiana, because yes, I'm crazy. Yes, I drive to Indy for the Scouting Combine. For the next episode of Locked On Commanders, we are going to prep for our conversations with Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, Lance Newmark. What do we want to hear from these 3 gentlemen? And more closely, for your entertainment factor, what do I believe we'll hear from them as we talk to these guys at the NFL Scouting Combine? That's coming up next this week, so make sure you're tuned in for that. Thank you in the meantime for coming through. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler Rowland kicks you off in the morning with some NFL espresso. Tony Wiggins brings you in for some real NFL talk in the afternoon for the all-new Locked On NFL, which is twice per day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every dayers. Thank you for coming through every single day. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.